Hey everyone, I'm Caitlin DeSena, and I'm responding to Marilyn Justiniano's original debate video where she stands behind side B of debate 4, being that economic developmental considerations must take precedent over environmental considerations. I originally argued the counterpoint in this debate. In my original video, I stood behind side A of debate 4, being that environmental considerations must take precedent over economic developmental considerations. And the reason that I wanted to kind of debate with what Marilyn had to say was because she brought up a lot of really good points from angles that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of myself. So it was really intriguing to look for counter arguments as I watched her video, simply because I was really interested and drawn into what she was saying. To start, I think that there's a lot of drawback and there can be a lot of criticism in saying that developmental considerations must take precedent over environmental considerations, just given the intense controversiality of the argument as a whole. Many would assume that to stand behind economic development rather than recognizing the importance of fighting climate change now is pushing a large issue that's troubling our world aside. It's easy to wonder how anyone could not want to put the environment as a higher priority given the circumstances of climate change and global warming. Marilyn, however, took it from another angle. One of her main points was that without proper attention to economic development, we won't be able to appropriately mitigate what she refers to as the symptoms of climate change, being those of global warming, rising sea levels, melting ice caps, all of those environmental disasters that we're seeing today. She goes on to suggest that if developmental considerations are handled responsibly, we can still tackle environmental issues and perhaps even come at them stronger as something of a united front. While this seems like a clear-cut solution, to me it's very idealistic, but also a little bit naive, as it's kind of optimistically assuming that everyone in the world is good, and after development, we'll find a way to fix climate change. Or at least that was my takeaway from this argument. And it's hard to say whether or not we, speaking globally, would be able to work together to fight climate change if given the opportunity to improve economic development first. For me personally, it's easier and more realistic to look at the facts. As I mentioned in my original argument, the people who would be hit hardest from the drastic effects of climate change are the world's poorest nations, and the economic development of these nations relies almost solely on their harvest and their agriculture industry. In fact, 3 out of 4 people living in poverty rely on agriculture and natural resources to survive. And for these people, the effects of climate change, shifting weather, limited water sources, and increased competition for resources are really a matter of life and death. So to take the time to work around the economic developments that may or may not lead to potentially working towards mitigating global warming doesn't do much given the time sensitivity of the matter. Climate change isn't a distant threat, it's a harsh reality that we're seeing the effects of all over the world today. It's a driver of fragility and conflict, and it's leading to a hungrier, more vulnerable world. Increasingly unpredictable weather patterns, shifting seasons, and natural disasters disproportionately threaten these poorer nations, increasing their risk and their dependency on humanitarian aid. So focusing on economic development as a way to fight climate change kind of becomes something of a cat and mouse game, where we're just barely skimming by trying to delicately keep on top of the quickly crumbling environment problems that we've created. Climate change threatens the cleanliness of our air, it depletes our water sources, and it limits food supply. It disrupts livelihoods, it forces families from their homes, and it pushes people into poverty. Not to mention that these environmental issues are the cause of a lot of conflict we see around the world today. It leads to food shortages, it threatens people's livelihoods, and it displaces entire populations, where institutions and governments are then unable to manage the stress or absorb the shocks of climate change, thus threatening the stability of the state and the society of the population. And by amplifying existing environmental, social, and political challenges, climate change increases the likelihood of competition and conflict over resources. And it can also intensify the existing conflicts and tensions that we're already seeing. So to truly get under the issue, it seems more effective and reliable to focus on climate change considerations so that there will actually be an economy to develop. As a society, we're always going to look for ways to progress, but we must be reminded that we're bound to this planet. And if we continue to harm it, we're going to continue to harm ourselves. We've prioritized the economic development over a healthier planet in the past, and we're still faced with the dire consequences of climate change. Right now, the Earth is our most valuable and, truth be told, vulnerable asset. If we continue to ignore the effects of climate change, the economy will eventually, it will continue to suffer from the lack of potable water, natural resources, which destroy the infrastructure and housing of cities, which can be very costly, polluted and wasted lands, which will basically become barren. We can't grow anything, and eventually will come to an economic collapse and a decadency of the human society. Therefore, we do need to prioritize the environment over economic development. That way, we can try to reverse or halt the drastic effects of climate change rather than focus on economic and developmental growth.